Good afternoon. I'm sorry that I'm running a little late. I was doing something else and got uh, had time get away from me a little bit. Um, so, how are we doing? How are you feeling? Tired. We just finished con law, the con law assignment, right? So that's over and done with. You don't have to think about it anymore. Um, so because of that, I'm guessing that you guys have not had a chance to think a whole lot about the tutorial question for this class for this week. Is that correct? Anybody else look at it?
I looked at it also.
Okay. Do you guys want a few minutes to gather your thoughts, or do you want to just jump right into it? Okay, let's take some time and you guys gather your thoughts and we'll reconvene in just a few minutes, okay? So I'm going to mute myself and give you the space. I'm still at my desk, so if you need anything, just unmute or pop yourself in the chat and I will come back and be available to you. Okay, so let's reconvene and let's check in and see what you guys have for us. So the question, right, as we know when we look on e-learning, the question is to explain the duty owed to a trespasser to a client. So this is another one of these client communication exercises, right? So who would like to go first?
Well, basically, I said that you generally owe a common duty to everybody. So if once the court feels like you know or you actually know that uh, that there was a trespasser on your property, you have a duty to keep the premise safe. So once you know, sorry, my notes are all over the place, so I'm trying to read through it. So once you know they're there, you are kind of expected to give them more or less the same duty of care that you would give lawful visitors. So of course it's somewhat less for burglars, but you're not supposed to be setting traps or something to purposefully hurt someone. If you are going to try to keep them out, it needs to be something that's relatively safe, like a fence or something, or like something that shows that you don't want them on your property. But nothing hidden. It has to be open and yeah.
Okay, so this is part of why occupier's liability is a difficult topic, right? Is that there is this sort of proliferation of standards. There's a lot of different duties that are owed depending on how the visitor is characterized. Um, and it does, there's lots of different categories here and it gets confusing. So I get that. But one of the things that I think we should flag for ourselves is that um, trespassers are never owed the same duty as lawful visitors, right? There are things you can't do to trespassers, but you never have to treat them the way that you would treat someone who is on the property lawfully. And so that's an important distinction to keep in mind. And Rihanna, I really want to say that I appreciate you going first. Going first is scary, right? Going first is, sort of is an expression of faith in yourself. And the other thing that I wanted to flag that I really wanted to say that I appreciated about your comments was that they were expressed in the form of statements. Okay, and this is not a criticism of anybody that's here or or really anyone who's even done this, but a lot of you guys seem to, when I ask questions, answer them with questions. And I want to encourage you to be more confident in yourselves because this is a classroom. This is a space where being wrong is allowed, where being wrong is encouraged, where the stakes are low. And B, when you go out into practice, if you stand up in court and the learned judge says, well, counselor, what about this thing? And your response is, well, is it that the other thing? If you answer a judge's question by asking him or her a question, the judge is likely to go, well, I'm asking you, counselor, so what do you think? So I say this to sort of flag the fact that Rihanna did a very good job of saying, this is what I think. And even though my reading of the cases and my reading of the authorities suggests that there's some difference in the doctrine, the confidence of her comments was very was really nice to hear. So thank you for that, Rihanna. One of the things that I want to encourage you guys to think about is how do we strike the balance between demonstrating that we understand a concept and explaining the concept in a way that will communicate it to a client, right? And this is why, and I said this a couple of times in the last time we did this exercise, but I can never remember whether I said it in any particular tutorial. So if you didn't hear this the first time, you're hearing it the second time. You're hearing it today. When you're talking to a client, I am of the opinion that jargon is okay, right? Jargon is fine because jargon is something that we use to be precise in what we say. But because clients don't have the training, you have to explain the jargon. So, for example, right? The courts describe the duty that you owe a trespasser as the duty of common humanity. And that's perfectly fine, right? That's a phrase you can use to a client. But then you have to go, okay, let me tell you what a duty of common humanity is and what that means and what you have to do. And so that is, that's sort of what I would encourage you to think about is what does the duty of common humanity mean? How would you explain the duty of common humanity to a client? This question's for everyone, so anybody feel free to jump in.
I think perhaps it is the expectation or something that any normal, sensible human being would, if if they see another human being in distress or in need of assistance, it's the help that would be rendered to that person.
It's the thing that you would do if you came across this person in this situation and it was just out in, a public place, right? What would you do in that situation? That's what you have to do for trespassers. There's no duty to make the premises safe. There's no duty to provide warnings, although certainly providing warnings can, that is one of the things that the court will look at to determine if you discharged the duty, right? So providing warnings makes it more likely that the court will find that you did what you needed to do. But yeah, I like that formulation that this is the duty of common humanity is really about what you would do for a stranger that you found in the trespasser situation just out in public. What would you do for them? I think that's a really helpful formulation. I like that. Thank you, Cassian. Okay. So anybody else want to take a stab at this?
So would that include the defendant have to have warning signs for like especially dangerous instances on their property? Is that like
so?
This
is one of those things where things get fact intensive, right? So you'll recall last week we did a lecture on how the courts determine whether you met the duty of common humanity, right? One of the things that we see is that the court will inquire into what you did to deter trespassers or to let them know that there were dangers on the property. And that may be, whether or not there were warning signs, whether or not there was a fence, right? Those may be the things that sort of determine whether you are liable or not, in the totality of the circumstances. But I think that one of the things that is difficult about this is that it is a totality of the circumstances test. And so the occupier may in one case have posted warning signs and be able, and that the court goes, yeah, okay, that was enough. But then there may be another case where, because of other circumstances that are present, that the court says, no, the warning signs aren't enough. There was more that you needed to do to fulfill your duty, right? And that's what I mean when I say these cases are fact intensive. It's subjective. Yes, exactly, right? What's important is to know the questions that the court is asking. But in terms of how those answers get weighed, that's going to be a much more subjective process. Because it's going to be very difficult for two cases to present exactly the same answers to all these questions, because there's like 7 or 8 of them. So, okay. Understood? Was that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to take a stab at this or have questions about occupiers' liability?
In just some, I had jotted down some thoughts. It isn't as fluid as Rihanna's, but I'm gonna try. I was going to say, well, at first tell the client like what is an occupier, so you have control of particular premises or you have ownership of it, so therefore it's your property. And if, let's say, somebody comes onto your property without permission, or without your knowledge, that person would be a trespasser. In those instances, that person would be, we would call that person a trespasser, and you have a responsibility, I suppose, in terms of ensuring at the lowest level some degree of care for that person. So if they become injured or come onto some harm on your premises, on your property, you basically need to show them basic human kindness or responsibility, or it would be a matter for the court to decide in terms of whether you were responsible enough or reasonable enough to take care of that person on that basic level. Otherwise, there'd be consequences, more or less.
So the couple of things that I might add there is, one thing that's important to remember is that if the trespasser comes and goes and the occupier never knows they were there and has no reason to think that they would be there, there's no duty owed, right? You can't prevent trespassers from coming onto your property if you never know they're coming onto your property to begin with, right? So that knowledge is an important piece of the puzzle. You don't have to know that the trespasser is there, but you do have to know that it's possible that they can be there. Okay. And what does it mean for it to be possible? Well, that it's a pretty low bar. But generally, if you've ever seen trespassers, or if there's something on the property that might attract trespassers, or if you have, if there's some sort of extrinsic reason to believe. Do you see now why I say that these cases become very fact intensive? Because what does it mean for there to be some reason to believe that people might trespass?
Because I'm looking at even the context of fencing your property. Is that mandatory, and is that sufficient to, I guess?
It's absolutely not mandatory, but it's probably a best practice in a lot of cases. So, Jaleesa, you came off mute. Did you have something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think that's where the difficulty comes in, when the facts kind of get a bit blurry or become complicated, because it's like, how, like, how do you expect, like, are you, like, how do you know who to expect to be on your property? Like, I understand in the instance for children, like, if a ball, like, like if the ball go over your fence or something, then you would expect, a child to go after it or something like that. But circumstances excluding that, like, it's like hard to determine like who to expect.
Well, what if your property is a shortcut between two places that people want to go?
And that's true. Yeah,
Right.
that makes sense.
So you see how sort of this inquiry can get very complicated very quickly and becomes very fact intensive. The key piece of the puzzle is remembering that trespassers, that the occupier doesn't have to know that people are trespassing if the court is able to go, well, look, you should have known. Like, come on, engage your brain, buddy, right? So what other questions do you guys have?
Is the yardstick any different if the property is unoccupied or,
Yes,
I'm sorry,
it is
I'm sorry,
different
say that,
to
say that again.
occupy.
I was just asking if the yardstick is any different if the property is unoccupied, but there's somebody who owns it.
So it seems to me that if the property is unoccupied, right, or abandoned in some way, then there's a higher standard than what we can sort of reasonably expect the occupier to know is going to be different, right? If you're not on the property on a daily basis, how would you know that people use your backyard as a shortcut between the school and the playground? Certainly we can't impute actual knowledge to an absentee owner, but whether or not we can impute constructive knowledge, right? You should have known this. That's a tougher question. Winston, did you have a question? You came off mute at one point.
No, sir, sorry.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to make sure that you, if you had anything that we dealt with it. Okay, so what other questions do you guys have? I'm guessing you guys are pretty tired after con law, huh? And you've got contracts the rest of this week, right? That's probably where all of your classmates are.
So I think all the classes just starting to get smaller, like the attendance in general.
Well, yeah, no, certainly that's, people stop coming to class. It's a known phenomenon in higher education. But this has been certainly this entire week, attendance has sort of gone from, yes, there's some absenteeism, but folks are generally coming, and it's just gone off a cliff this week. And I assumed that it had something to do with the con law assignment and the contracts exam that folks were revising. So I'm not upset about it because I understand that you guys get to determine your own priorities. And if this class isn't what's important to you this week, then that's fine. We'll see you next week, right? So anything else, guys?
Just for my clarity, does the legislation, the two pieces of legislation that are enforced in Barbados and Jamaica, do they treat in any way with trespassers? Is that
No,
right?
they do not. They do not change the common law rule on trespassers.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
they are focused on providing clarity and consistency for lawful visitors, but they don't address trespassers at all. Well, I say that there are some things particularly related to child trespassers where the statute imposes some particular expectations on occupiers, but that's it. The common law rule on the generic trespasser does not change.
Thank you.
So, okay. Anything else? It has been a rough semester. We are almost done. So you guys have shown a lot of resilience and capacity, and I'm very appreciative of the work that you've done in my course. And I look forward to continuing with you guys next semester and hopefully actually meeting all of you. You know, I hope so. Okay, we'll wrap this up early, and if there's no other questions. So we will take care. We'll see you guys next week. So take care.
Yeah, bye, sir.
Have a good weekend and bye.